Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurin Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
So, as you probably all know, this seminar is on Vaishnava culture. And as I stated, culture touches every aspect of our lives and influences every moment of our lives. So it is a huge subject which we can just touch on some small areas in these few lectures. Now, culture, that means that human behavior, attitudes, interactions. Okay. Behavior, attitudes, and interactions. Culture is not practiced or inculcated in a vacuum. Culture is an attribute of a society or civilization. So, the basic building block of society has traditionally been the family unit. That is changing in the modern day. What was traditionally considered a family is often not what children are nowadays often brought up in what would not traditionally have been considered a family. We have the phenomenon of what is called the one-parent family, which means usually the mother and children. But traditionally, family meant more than that. It meant there should be a father also. And actually, and I'll speak more about this a little later on, family often meant much more than just parents and children. So even though nowadays the family has become often only with one parent, still we can say that the basic unit of any traditional society is the family unit. And it is principally in the family that basic cultural and behavioral attitudes are imbibed. When there's a famous verse in the Bhagavatam in which Lord Rishabdev states, Pitana sasyat jananina sasyat, that one should not become one should not become a father or mother unless one can deliver his dependents from birth and death. In the Vedas also it is stated that the mother is the first guru. So that we can understand because the mother first teaches everything. The very basic activities of how to eat and how to deal with others. It's first of all taught by the mother to children. And traditionally mothers, and even more so grandmothers, they teach the children by telling them various stories and like this. So much we learn in the very beginning stages of our lives, and we learn in the home. Later on we become influenced by a broader circle than simply the home and family circle. As a child gradually grows, then he mixes with friends outside the family. And in the modern age, we go to school, which we learn so many things. Not just about reading, writing, and arithmetic, but we learn so many different cultural and behavioral values. And of course, a very great imparter of cultural or anti-cultural values in the modern age is what is called the one-eyed guru of the TV. There are so many different influences on a person as he grows up from childhood, but the first and in many ways the most important is the family. So it's not surprising that in the Vedic literature there is much emphasis put on the importance of family. And actually there's also much spoken about renunciation of family life. This should be understood in context, because in the Vedic culture, much emphasis is put on one's responsibility and duty. Now, often in the modern age, our devotees find it easier to renounce family life than even many great exalted and pious people brought up in Vedic culture were or are able to do. Because people in Vedic culture, they were strongly attached to their families, but attachment with religious or dharmic sense. So when our devotees, they read about renunciation of family life, they think, okay. because actually they had no religious attachment, or not proper religious attachment in the first place. Religious attachment means attachment to performing one's duty or responsibility towards one's family members. Now also we find in Bhagavad Gita that Lord Krishna speaks of renunciation in the mode of passion. Krishna states that renunciation, when one gives up something because he finds it troublesome, that's in the mode of passion. Now certainly family life tends to be troublesome, and for that reason one is advised to men are advised to ultimately renounce that. But that should not be prematurely. If one gives up family life as troublesome, but then simply makes another comfortable arrangement for himself, then that is not proper renunciation. Now, everything in the Vedic culture is ultimately meant for elevation to Krishna consciousness. So it's a very responsible life. Everyone is supposed to act very responsibly and not whimsically, understanding that this human life is very valuable and should not be misused. So when one enters into family life, that was with a very great responsibility. Of course, a major factor for entering family life is because of material desire. But it is not simply for fulfilling material desire that one should enter family life. If one enters family life only for the fulfillment of material desire, then that is simply animal life. That's why we find that in Sanskrit there are various words which define the role of the wife in terms of her being accepted as a religious function. For instance, there is the one word for wife is sahadharmini, which means one with whom one practices religious activities. So in this way, family life is to be understood as a religious institution. And we find that in every religion of the world that there is a marriage ceremony in which vows are made. And these vows are considered sacred and religious, to be taken very seriously. And that the vows are considered sacred means they cannot be violated. In the Western Christian tradition at marriage, they say, do you accept this wife I promise to live with her or him in sickness or health, in prosperity or poverty. Is that in the Russian tradition also? No. Okay, so you can translate that. In happiness or distress, till death us do part. So that was the vow. Now you're together. That's it. Whatever happens, you have to stay together till death us do part. So this was taken very seriously because it was done in the name of God, in the church, or in the Hindu tradition, in a fire sacrifice with calling all the devas. And because marriage was a religious institution and people were religiously minded, then they took it very seriously. It's very interesting, you see, in the modern age we have so much like family advice and all this kind of things. Even in this Divnomorsk camp, there are 2 seminars going on fully dedicated to the subject of family life in Krishna consciousness. Now it's very interesting that in the past there were no such things as seminars on family life. No one wrote books about how to live in family life. But there were no divorces either. It wasn't that there weren't any problems. But people somehow or other, they lived together, for better or for worse, in happiness or distress, in sickness or health, in prosperity or poverty, until death they did part. Till the death then did part. So what happened? What went wrong? Why is it that in the modern age there should be so much advice on how to live in family life? People, they get married and still they're not happy. Everyone thinks, man thinks, I will find a nice young woman and we will get married and we will live happily. And a young woman thinks, I will find a knight in shining armor. One day he'll ride up in front of our apartment in his armor and ring the bell, 7th floor, say, on the buzzer, say, who is this? It's a knight in shining armor. Oh, okay. And then you'll come down, jump on the horse and run off and live happily ever after. Or there are these fairy stories where someone marries the princess or something like that, and it ends up, and they lived happily ever after. So of course these are fairy stories. Reality is when you get married, I mean, you have to work hard and clean the pots and paint the walls and look after children, and it's not as romantic as it might seem to be before getting married. But anyway, that point I was making, everyone thinks, I will marry and I will live happily. But somehow or other, especially in the modern age, it seems to be a very great thing if even husband and wife can stay together throughout their lives. Even in ISKCON, if we meet some couple and they're married, they've been married for the last 25 years, we think, oh, that's surprising. There are a few. Just like Ravindra Sarup Prabhu is here, he's been married to the same wife throughout. I mean, since before he joined.
He's still
married to the same wife. Grandchildren also. And there are other devotees like Bhurijan Prabhu, he's also an initiating guru in our movement. One day, there was one film actress she was very famous. She had just starred in a film with Mick Jagger, if you were ever unfortunate enough to hear his name. And then she joined ISKCON, which became Prabhupada's disciple. And then Prabhupada sent her, she was in Australia, he sent her to Hong Kong, where Bhurijan Prabhu was, and told him, you go there and marry him. He'd never heard of her before, they never met, go and marry her. And they're still married. So there are such cases, but we find that even within our movement, there have been and are many problems in family life that we can judge by the very fact that there are seminars on this topic. And indeed, many of our devotees, even before joining the movement, or even after joining the movement, there are so many family problems or may even be divorced. So we don't condemn anybody. Maybe even in one sense you could say that they had to go through so much distress in family life. That could be one of the causes for making one come to Krishna consciousness. I know myself that as a child there were so many problems in my home, and my father ended up divorcing my mother, and when I think of my childhood, it's full of so much suffering, so that helped me to come to Krishna consciousness, I see. However, we want to create a culture within our society, ISKCON, whereby there can be stable family life. Because as I was saying, the family is the basic unit of society. And even though there are temples of ISKCON with devotees living in the temples, we can't expect that the whole, if we're going to spread Krishna consciousness more and more, we can't expect that we'll just turn the whole world into one big temple. One big monastery, let's change that. Most devotees are going to be family people and living with their families. So, for the sake of the peaceful living of our own devotees, and also so that we can show a better example to society at large, it is required that our devotees have a stable, peaceful family life as much as possible. Srila Prabhupada had a very great vision for the Krishna conscious movement. Srila Prabhupada actually wanted to change the culture of the world by giving Krishna consciousness. In other words, when people, we want that people will see that this Krishna conscious movement is so wonderful, I would also like to be part of this. I would like to live like this. So definitely Krishna consciousness is very attractive. And when simple-hearted or pious people see this, then the activities of Krishna consciousness, then they'll definitely be attracted. Who would not be attracted to dancing, singing, nice prasadam, and so many things. However, if in our social life, everything is disordered, and our families are all getting split up and broken and divorces, then it's not the kind of thing that people will want to become part of. But if people see that not only do we have music, art, dancing, drama, but we also have very stable social system, stable families, then that will be very attractive. So no doubt we have a very, very long way to go in our movement to set up a social system in which people can live stably and happily and advance in Krishna consciousness. Because we are living in a modern society, and to a large extent we are influenced by that. And we're finding most devotees find it very difficult to combine earning a living with Krishna consciousness. Having to work, earn money, mix up with karmis, it's not so conducive for Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada, he wanted actually to set up our own communities where devotees could grow their own food, produce their own cloth, produce everything they need, live very simply and chant Hare Krishna. So there have been and are some moves towards setting up such communities. These are still very much in the pioneering stage. Nevertheless, even if we're not able to become part of such a pioneering community, there are certain principles that we can adopt in family life to help make them stable. The basic principles of behavioral interaction as given in Vedic family life, they still apply in the modern age. Now, in the Vedic social system, different roles are ascribed to different members of society and different within the family unit also. Now, the most marked difference is that between the two sexes. Within the family unit, men and women have clearly demarcated different roles to play. The role of the husband is to be the head of the family, husband and father, and it's his responsibility to see that there's income for the family. And to a large extent, discipline is also special in his hands. And women's role is to be in the home, looking after children. In the modern age, these roles are all mixed up. But actually, as Prabhupada explained, and Prabhupada explained that this is just a natural biology and psychology, it's not his dogmatic opinion. And that women have a certain kind of body which is meant for giving birth to children. And by nature's arrangement, which means God's arrangement, from the woman's body comes the milk which nourishes the child. And generally in most societies around the world, women, there's no contraception, abortion or any such things, and women give birth fairly regularly. So women are required to look after children. And by the arrangement of Mother Nature, that women, they naturally have the tendency to want to look after children. So you'll see even young girls like 8 years old, they naturally, if they see some baby, they naturally feel they want to pick it up and look after that baby. So this is a very natural role for a woman to be the mother. Now, modern society, they're promoting that women should have some separate career and all this kind of thing. But in traditional societies, including in traditional Vedic society, this is not recommended. It is possible that they do some kind of money, some income earning activities, but within the home. But the ideal is that actually the man, he should earn, and the woman should look after children. And another point which in the modern age people find very hard to accept, but which is prescribed in the Vedic literature, and which Prabhupada mentions many times in his books, is that women, they should be submissive to their husbands. Because if they're not, then they'll always be fighting. If each is trying to dominate the other, then they'll always be fighting. In the modern age there are divorce laws, so eventually one of them will think, why should I bother? Just, forget it. Finish. So like I was saying, our devotees are practicing Krishna consciousness, but in many ways we're still culturally conditioned by the Western way of thinking. And this is especially seen in the breakdown of families within our society. That the fact that there are so many family problems means that we don't know how to live according to the prescriptions given in the Vedic literatures. Actually, I'm seeing here in Russia that many of the older generation, they never had any such problems in their family life. Problem means there's always some problem. But basically, Previously, men and women got married and they remained married one way or the other. But it's very much a symptom of the modern age, both within ISKCON and outside of ISKCON, that people get married but they are unhappy and after a short time they divorce. Or sometimes even after a long time they divorce. Just like my eldest sister, she was married for about 20 years and then she divorced out. So, one principle of stable family life is the commitment, just a commitment. Commitment itself. That now we're going into this and that's it. Married and maybe the husband will maybe take sannyas later, a long time later. Even sannyas that may not be recommended for everybody. Bhakti Thakur recommends that it's better that in the modern age that most people, even they don't exactly take sannyas, but they live as vanaprastha, with husband and wife together in a dham in their old age. But the point is, having made the commitment, then that should stay. And husband and wife should agree to cooperate together in Krishna consciousness. Following these basic guidelines, the husband should be responsible for bringing in income, and the wife should be very chaste and faithful, and not fight with her husband. Of course, sometimes these things may happen in certain families, but that creates tension in the home, and who wants that? You see, if you go outside the home and you have to work and there's so much pressure and tension, then you come home and there's more pressure and tension, then life just becomes too difficult. So Prabhupada, of course, he engaged his lady disciples in various ways, seeing that they were mostly young American girls, and they were brought up in a way that they expected to live practically as men in many ways. So Prabhupada had them go on book distribution and so many different things. But in his books, he made it very clear, and in his lectures, that actually every woman should be married. And he was also preaching very strongly that it's better that brahmacharis don't get married, because for them it's better they just remain renounced. So Prabhupada said this once I believe it was in Bombay, that in our society all the women should be married and all the brahmacharis should remain brahmacharis. So one of the devotees who was a manager asked Prabhupada that, well, how is that possible, Prabhupada? Prabhupada said, that is your management. Anyway, most of the brahmacharis do get married. Once Prabhupada, maybe you heard of the Radha Damodar bus party, in which there are several busfuls of brahmacharis traveling all over America distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. So Prabhupada once gave a lecture to all of the brahmacharis and said, you're very fortunate, you're brahmacharis, you just stay like this your whole lives, don't get married. There were about 300 brahmacharis present there. One of them was Madhav Maharaj, Bhakti Vishwamba Madhav Maharaj. You know Madhav Maharaj? He goes to Russia. So he said he's the only one in that group who didn't get married. So never mind, ladies, there's hope for you yet. So mostly people do get married, and having once got married, one should marry with a commitment. It's not that, well, we'll try it out, and if we don't like it, well, we'll get divorced. That is not proper. Now again, I'm saying these things, and many of you, you may have gone through these difficulties. Some of you divorced yourself, and you're hearing this, and you're thinking, this is very horrible for me to hear. But again, I'm not blaming you, but I'm just saying that you can bear these things in mind to help others, future generations, so they don't have to suffer in the same way that you do. And brahmacharis who are here, there are not many here, don't have to lose hope either. It's not that you have to get married. No one's forcing you. But if you don't, then you'll be preaching, and preaching means you're preaching to people, and most people are married or are going to get married, so we should also have some knowledge of these things. Oh yeah, so I was talking about how Prabhupada, he engaged the American ladies who joined his movement in various ways. But Prabhupada said that the daughters of our grihastas, they should be trained differently. And he said they should learn to read and write, especially so they can read my books. And apart from that, the main things they should learn are how to cook very nicely, one thing, and they should learn the principle of being very chaste and faithful to their husband. And Prabhupada said, if our girls are trained like this, I will personally make sure they marry a first-class husband. Now we see today in the modern age that young girls, they're trained engineering and physics and business management and all this kind of thing. But they don't know how even to cook, a chapati or a loaf of bread. So this doesn't make for a very happy family arrangement, because you might be an expert in engineer as a woman or whatever, but sooner or later you're going to have to look after children. So actually these two things, being a mother and a wife, it conflicts with the idea of having a career. Even if we say that women in ISKCON, they should be temple presidents, well, that conflicts with their natural dharma of their body to have children and be mothers. What often happens in the modern age is that women, they're having a career and a job and this and that, and then they have children, but they feel that the children are a disturbance to their career. And so they don't really look after their children, they go on working. And in this way the children are neglected. They come home from school and there's no one there at home. And this has become such a problem in America that we find that the children, this is a great contributing factor, that the children are just wild monsters. As you know, in America it's not uncommon for children from the age of, say, 7 up to commit murders. And sometimes a child, maybe 14 years old, will go into school with a gun and shoot 15, 20 people dead. Of course, that a child will kill 15 others, that's not very common. It's only happened, 5 or 6 times. No, I know. But individual murders by children, quite common. And that children beat and torture others is just extremely common. That they beat their teachers is common. That they insult their teachers is, it's just as common as sneezing. More common. That they take drugs in the school and so many things. So there are many different contributing factors to this, this whole syndrome of children just being completely horrible. You might see some nice little child and pat him on the head, what a nice boy, and he gets out a gun and shoots you. So there may be many different contributing factors, but definitely one of the contributing factors is that children, they are not brought up in happy families. Their parents don't care for them. Their mother's too busy working and then going out in the day and then going out to parties at night to care for the children. And many of them, they don't even know their fathers because their parents divorced when they were like 1 year old or something. And so they grow up with the one-eyed guru as their mentor. And they see an average of, the average child in America sees 6 murders a day on TV. So, and then the whole very strongly materialistic society, and there's no parents to properly guide them. And then naturally they become just totally materialistic and inhuman. So we want to avoid this syndrome within our society. We want that our devotees live very happily with Krishna in the center of their lives, and that our children are brought up in a very caring and loving atmosphere. And if people in general can see this, then they'll naturally be attracted to take up Krishna consciousness also. So like I say, the basic principles are very simple. Actually, on several occasions, people came to me and told that they want to divorce. Now, it can be very difficult when one of the parents is wanting to be Krishna conscious and the other is very much against it. Even then, especially if there are children, that even if one spouse is Krishna conscious and the other not, then the one who is should just try to tolerate that situation for the children's sake. What I was saying, different people came to me, couples, and told me they want to divorce. Or sometimes women have come to me and said, my husband is very unreasonable, I want to divorce. But I've always advised against that. On the basis of one of Srila Prabhupada's purports in the 9th canto of Bhagavatam, which he relates, he gives the purport in the story of Chavan Muni and his wife Sukanya. So Chavan Muni was a very old yogi. His face was completely wrinkled and dried up. And as it happened, well, what happened, you see, he was meditating, sitting in one spot, and some ants built an anthill over his body. Have you seen these ant hills? They build a big hill like this. So some ants, he was sitting there for so long that the ants built a whole body over him, and he just had some holes where he would look out with his eyes and he would breathe or whatever. So it happened that the one king came hunting in the jungle area there. So for some reason or other, he happened to have brought his beautiful young daughter along with him that time. So Chivan Muni was looking out and he saw the king and the daughter and everything. And impelled by fate or for whatever reason, that young girl saw this anthill with two shining lights which happened to be the eyes of the Muni. And not knowing what it was, she took a twig, and a sharp twig, and poked in both those holes and blinded the Muni. And then she thought, oh, what did I do? Maybe I did something wrong. So at that moment, the whole hunting party, all the king and his men, they felt their whole bowels and bladders become tight, and none of them could pass stool or urine. So the king thought something unusual has happened here, because he knew that nothing happens exactly by chance. Someone must have done something to have engendered this situation. So he asked his daughter, did you happen to do anything? I mean, what's going on here? Did anyone do something they shouldn't have done? And the daughter said, well, actually I put some twigs in the holes and then some blood came out, so I think something might be wrong there. And then the king understood there must be a Muni meditating in there. So he immediately went there, and to avoid getting himself and his whole party cursed, he immediately offered that, dear Muni, I'm sorry my daughter made a foolish mistake. You please take her as your wife and be pleased with me. So that was the Vedic culture. If a woman a young girl was given away in marriage, whoever the father gave her to, she had to accept. So even though the Muni was old enough to be her grandfather and older still, she accepted, yes, he is my husband, and served him very nicely. Even though she was used to the luxury of the palace, she accepted the jungle situation. So Chivan Muni was old, and old people often tend to be somewhat irritable. But nevertheless, without herself becoming irritated when he became irritated at her, Sukanya served him very peacefully and very faithfully. In the meantime, Chivan Muni was thinking that, my body is so old and worn out, and how can I enjoy with this young girl? So by the grace of the Ashwini Kumars, who are the two physicians of the demigods, he got his body transformed into a young and beautiful body. So a little later, the king came again to the forest to see how his daughter was doing. And he saw her with a very nice-looking young man. And he chastised her that, you see, you left your husband just because he was old, and you went with this young man. This is abominable. Even though she was married to someone who you might think, well, it wasn't a very good match for her, still she was expected to take up her role as a wife, and in that situation, and not be unchaste. But actually Sukanya explained that, no, actually this is my husband. I have not left him. I am dutiful. I have not given up my duty. Now Prabhupada explains in one purport here that Sukanya, even though you might consider she got a very bad deal, still she performed her duty. Being a very beautiful and qualified daughter of a king, she must have expected that I will be married to a very qualified prince, and in this way she will become the queen of some kingdom. But instead she was married to an old, irritable Muni and had to live in a forest with him. But nevertheless she accepted that situation and served him to the best of her ability. And it's stated that because of that humble serving mood, she conquered the heart of her husband. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, he uses the word, this is victory for a woman. That if her husband is irritable and the wife also becomes irritable, and then they will clash and there will be fighting and divorce. Rather, by her humble serving mood, she should conquer his heart. So Prabhupada writes, this is victory for a woman. So this is the approach recommended in the Vedic literatures, and which Prabhupada recommended. And I'm personally seeing that it works also. It's not something that's simply written in the Puranas as some nice story to tell to give some entertainment. But even though times have changed very much, still basic human psychology remains the same. So the lesson we can learn from this is that if women try to very faithfully serve their husbands and be sweet with them, then the husband himself, even if he's irritable by nature, will tend to cool down. And even if he is unreasonable by nature, then fighting with him isn't going to help. Even if one is in a difficult situation, one should tolerate that and take it as the lot given to you, or the position given to you by your fate. And in this way, just go on with life. Because otherwise, if we think, well, I don't like this family, maybe I'll, try again, get another family. You can go on your whole life getting married, remarried again and again and again. That's why we see sometimes, even in our movement, we see women that got 5 children from 5 different so-called husbands. They're trying to imitate Draupadi. The thing is that was divinely ordained, and the Pandavas were the Pandavas. So the basic principles are very simple. If we simply adopt them in our lives, then we can live happily in Krishna consciousness. No doubt it's difficult to bring up children in the modern age, because they tend to get contaminated by the modern society. But we should do our best to bring them up in Krishna consciousness. And if children see that the parents themselves are happy in Krishna consciousness, then that is the best way to bring them up, and they will in future appreciate that, and maybe devotees themselves fully also. Family life in Krishna consciousness is a big topic, because there are many different complexities and many different types of situations. Maybe I wrote a book, Brahmacharya in Krishna consciousness. It's not a very big book. The basic point is that you live simply, chant Hare Krishna, serve Guru and Krishna, and go back to Godhead. So I have a plan in due course of time also to write a book, Family Life in Krishna Consciousness, and in fact, we may be starting work on that very soon. But I think that will be a bigger book than the Brahmacharya book, because family life is more complex. There are more different kinds of situations. However, the basic principles are quite simple also. How to apply them in modern life, that may bring various difficulties. But the basic principles that husband and wife live together, cooperate together, and be in Krishna consciousness together. And in this way, live a simple life with Krishna in the center. Have kirtan in the home daily, offer all your food to Krishna, associate with other devotees, try to preach Krishna consciousness. In this way, live a Krishna-centered life, even though living in a broader society. And in this way, chant Hare Krishna, be happy and prepare to go back home to Godhead. And then husband and wife can live together forever in their eternal spiritual forms in the spiritual world. So, Hare Krishna, we'll finish there. Tomorrow is questions day. So, please write